Okay. We're up to perek lamed aleph. So it's a very apropos time.
We are where?
Perek lamed aleph. We're also on Chodesh Iyar. Aleph Rosh Chodesh Iyar is the yard side of Chaim Vital tonight. Big night. The whole Gilui of Pnimis HaTorah begins with Arizal, and the whole life of the Arizal was there to teach to Chaim Vital. Well, Chaim Vital was actually older. Chaim Vital was a Talmud of the Alshich, and also of Yosef Cairo, the Mechaber, Baal Shulchan Aruch, and he was supposed to take over, be the Poisek Hador after his rabbi. But that was the direction he was going. So he was groomed by the Alshich. He learned Kol Torah Kula with Chaim Vital in his 20s. At 26, his rabbi, Yosef Cairo, said that he'll be taking over. He'll be the one to take over the mantle of being the Rosh of Klal, of the Poisek Hador. Then what happened was Arizal decided to leave Egypt and come to Eretz Yisrael. And as soon as he came to Sfas, the beginning, Chaim Vital didn't really approach him. He thought his Rebbe in Kabbalah was the Ramak, the Moshe Cordovero, so he was already writing a Pirush on the Zohar in his 20s, and he didn't feel he needed the Arizal. But then something happened, and he finally got to him. Arizal told him his whole purpose of coming to Tzfas was to teach this neshama, he had a special neshama, and in 2 years he gave him over to Kol Torah Kula. That's from Chaim Vital.
You all learned for 2 years?
What?
You all learned in Kasha for 2 years?
2 years, that's it.
Wow.
In 2 years. But in the beginning, when he was learning by him, first Rabbi Yosef Karo came to Arizal. You have to remember, Yosef Karo was in his later years, and he wanted to learn by the Arizal. And he sat down by a chair, and he fell asleep, which a lot of us do. And then
I'm feeling good now.
what? And this minute goes back to Matan Torah. By Matan Torah, we had to sleep. I shouldn't have to wake us up. So this is a hug that we have. These are spiritual reasons, because neshama understands better when it's out of the body. It's not mukbal, so it can understand clearer. Any derech you want to use is fine. But anyway, he really wanted to listen to the shir, and he fell asleep. Came another time, fell 3 times. The Gadol Hador falls asleep in the middle of the shir. Arizal went out there, listen, this is not for you. Go write a Shulchan Aruch in Klal Yisrael, and that was it. But Chaim Vital, actually, there was one other Gadol Hador had that same cheshek to learn Pnimis HaTorah, and that was the Chavetz Chaim. Sevan Haggis Chavetz Chaim, it writes, let me write that the Chavetz Chaim is very close to the Leshem of Yosef's grandfather. And he said, he writes there, Chavetz Chaim, told Tamid that his Nafsheh Choshka, his whole life he wanted to put in totally into Pnimis HaTorah, to limit the Soid. That's what his whole neshama wants. But what could he do? He was sent down here, he had to write a Mishnah Berurah, and so he accepted his mission, and that was it. But his Ratzon was for the...
Why was it such a big gilui, if you don't mind? Why was it such a big gilui in the time of the Arizal? You have on one side you have the Shulchan Aruch, which organized everything. The other side you have the Arizal to open up the Kabbalah, and got that started.
They said the Galus Niftechu Ma'anos HaChochma, it was a little bit earlier before then. But it was after the expulsion from Spain. It was the generation after that. And anytime you have a symptom, you have a big gili afterwards. It's like an olive, like a zayas. When you stress it, the oil comes out. All is Pnimis HaTorah. And Klal Yisrael went through, anytime you go through massive difficulties, there's much more greater gili. So after World War II, look at the amount of Torah that has come in the last 100 years, or the last 50 years, whatever, 70 years, since the Holocaust. All these tukufas after the expulsion from Spain, that next tukufa was tremendous Gilui. So anyway, Zchusa Yogan Aleinu, which should hopefully help us open up as we get closer to the Gula, more and more the Pnimis Torah. So we're up to perek Lamed Aleph, and just to recap, we've learned 2 prokim, Chavtes and Lamed, for the people who try very hard to serve Hashem, but they have Tzimtzum Halev. It just doesn't. It doesn't go. It doesn't go. It doesn't seep in. It's not working. So there's something wrong. They're doing they're making all the motions. They go to shul, davening. It just, the heart is not there, and they want to. It's not that the rasa is not there. It just doesn't work. Everybody has that in life. Sometimes different. Some have it more regularly. Some have it constantly. Some have occasionally. Sometimes within the davening itself, one part of davening you get distracted. Another part is good. But there's a Tzimtzum Halev where sometimes a person is in a massive in life, could be because of external reasons, issues in parnasa, family, whatever, health, that distract the person. And some there we had program to explain how to deal with that. But sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's just Tzimtzum Halev, which comes from either a virus from earlier in life. There's a Tzimtzum Halev, there's something amount of covering. And the Baal Tanya gave us 2 prokim, really how to knock down this Tzimtzum Halev, how to knock down the ego of the person, the yeshus, and that breaks the shell so that the light could shine in and the neshama could serve Hashem properly. And we said in the last perek we explained that Kedusha is the need of bittul, and Klippa is the need of yeshus, of a person's self. And we also explained that. So that's pretty much the. We learn how to break up the Yetzer Hara by focusing that we're really, with all our capabilities, worse than the lowest creature that Hashem made, because we could choose to rebel against Hashem. And then we said, the last Kiddush we said last time was that people enjoy being sad. There's a special pleasure of being unhappy, because it's really a bechina of self-service. It's all about the self. It's all feeling about yourself. Why does a person feel bad? Anybody who is a little cheshbon nefesh and thinks about himself and follows instructions from perek Lamed or perek Chavtes, and thinks about where he's holding a life versus his goals or what he could do, nobody's going to be happy. Anyone one thinks about oneself, automatically one gets sad. Because we all have high aspirations, and we're not there yet, so that's the cause of sadness. And that's a perverse type of pleasure, actually. We have pleasure in the sadness because a person is focusing on himself.
It also relieves you from responsibilities, possibly.
Yeah, it releases you because you're helpless. Happiness is when you take away the self, you go away from yourself. Because whenever you think about yourself, there's too many things to be unhappy about. The trick is don't think about yourself. Remove the self. That's the whole avodah. That's the whole Tanya. Take the self, put it, shelve it somewhere else. Ultimate happiness when you're brought to Hashem. That's where we left off. So now we're going to perek Lamed Aleph, and he's going to explain this. And this is what he's saying. Let's say you spend a lot of time in the last 2 prokim, and the last 2 prokim are prokim of that talk about how to think about how low a person is, and that bring him to kind of sadness, lias ben michas ruach leiv nishbar, by contemplating all these things, how really a person is holding by any madregas and breaking himself. What's going to happen? He's going to lead to nemichas ruach, lowliness of the soul, and leiv nishbar, a broken heart. And we know that's opposite of Chasidus. The whole Sefer from the Shabbat talks about that that it's very close to serve Hashem. We know if the Hashem b'simcha. Simcha is another term of this entire sefer. So how can we have two prokim that tell us how to knock ourselves down, how to deflate our balloon, how to make us feel bad? How does it fit in with a nice, happy chassid? It doesn't fit into the whole Tanya. So he said two words. Lo yachush. Don't worry. Why not? After you finish these two prokim, we really need you need help. Why lo yachush? It says like this. This sadness, which is coming from spiritual accounting, not from physical things, not from panasa or other things which we dealt with prior, but spiritual sadness, which is a real sadness. It comes from klipa. It's not kedusha. Kedusha is only happiness. Anything that comes from the side of kedusha is going to be good, is going to be happy and joyful.
You're saying if a person's feeling bummed out about their avodas Hashem, you can be sure that bummed out feeling isn't an indication of his distance from Hashem, but in fact,
it's klipa. It's
klipa.
absolute klipa.
Not a functional thing.
But it's a good klipa.
It's a good thing why? Because it gets our attention.
Yeah, there's good klipa and bad klipa. If you have a pistachio nut, you have 3 layers. Gimel klipas tameis. You have an outlet, and you see it covers the nut. Then you have the hard part of the shell. That's not edible. But then there's a thin layer, like klipas noga.
Okay, so this is sadness. Is the klipas noga you're saying?
Klipas noga, but from kedusha. This klipas noga could be kedusha, and from the other way. This is the side kedusha. Because where is the sadness coming from? From a good place, from spiritual accounting. The sadness is no good. The sadness is klipa, but it comes from a good shorish. Now, why do we have this combined? So he explains very simply. He says, because we know kedusha, there's no place of sadness at all when it comes to kedusha. Kedusha is total happiness. If your sadness is coming from spiritual reasons, remember in the first perek that klipas noga has a good part and a bad, like Eitzadas Tov has a good part and bad part. So if your atzis is from you're not living up to your spiritual goals, that's the good part of klipa, but it's still klipa. It's still in the category of klipa. Well, why do we want it all together if it's klipa? So we'll see why it's a benefit to us to use this klipa. Since spiritual accounting that leads to sadness is from klipa, we don't want to do that all the time. We want to stay away from klipa as much as possible. And that's why the Rizal tells us, even dagus avonos and iruya, worrying about one's sins or making a spiritual accounting is not for all the time. A person not supposed to spend all day thinking about his averos, even though someone once asked me why I have in my car, I have a plaque. It says Shavisi Hashem Lenegdi Samer. That plaque is a plaque that goes with me all the time. And at September 11th, when my car got destroyed, that remained. Later, after that, all my kids put that plaque in their car. One of my daughters was teaching in Queens, so she was not married yet. Every morning she would drive to Queens. And I get a call from Hatzalah that my daughter's in the ambulance. It was an accident. And she's okay. And they put her on the phone while she was in the stretcher. I told her, don't worry, I'm okay. But I left, I should go to the accident where it was, and then meet her in the hospital. Take her out to Queens. I knew she was okay because I spoke to her, so it wasn't that panicky. I get to 50th Street or whatever it was. The whole street was cordoned off because somebody was killed. Because a truck ran over my daughter's car, and then the truck ran onto the sidewalk, killed somebody, knocked down a pole. Don't ask what was going on. Meanwhile, I get to the scene, and the thing is cordoned off. So I tell the police, my daughter called me. She wants me to take something in the car. He told me it's not possible. Nobody came out alive from that car. I said, what are you talking about? I just spoke to my daughter. She told me to go get the thing. So it can't be. There was no back of the car. It was like after the front seat, all there was the shvisi and her seat. I have a picture of it. There's like no back of the car. But once I was thinking that I really should have two plaques in the car because it's shnei to meet them. There's chatasi l'negdi samid and shvisa negdi samid. Chatasi l'negdi samid, and then I have another plaque for shvisa. I felt chatasi l'negdi samid a little bit gives it some heart, like it says over here. Not all the time you have to think about chatasi l'negdi samid. So I never bought that second plaque. But the point is that even spiritual thinking about a verse is not for all the time, only certain times. The Arizal says, definitely not when you're davening. Davening is a time for you to be happy. You want Hashem to answer your feelings. Don't start thinking about all the Averas. That is not the time. Just maybe slach lanu for a minute, but that's about it. After that, you got to move on. That's why Hashivenu is right after that. And it's not a bracha l'matol. You can say slach lanu avinu, kichatonu, but then they say Hashivenu, what's a b'tshuva, and there it's finished. Right? It's gone. Now you're now in a different matzav. You can ask for refuah and parnasa and whatever else you need. Why? Because generally thinking about negative things is not the ideal in Avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem has with the simcha. We have certain times we need to think about it. Kriyish Shalmita, an accounting of the day every night. That's a tremendous time to do it. But it still has to be. We'll see afterwards. It has to be converted to Torah. So the Arizal says, "L'chein kos v'Arizal shafilu dag zavanis einu ruya kim b'shas vidui." Only when you do vidui, tachnu for a minute. Lo b'shas tefillah v'talmud Torah. Not when you're learning, not when you're davening. Shesichlis b'simcha, sheb'sad kedusha dafka, and certainly in your house, your family, you have to be. It has to always be b'simcha. And so, why do we? But in this situation, when the guy feels he has a timtum alev, he's got spiritual. He's numb. He has a numbness and he doesn't feel anything. He needs to somehow break that klipa, and he has to take a good klipa, thinking about his averos and his weaknesses, and that will break the self, and that will get him out of it. Why? So he says it is. Alpha became harekachi amida. This is the way it is. If you want to subdue the sitracha, if you want to knock out the klipa, you got to do with something like it. If you want to fight, you have to fight with weapons. If the enemy has weapons, you got to fight with weapons. Kamam Rabbi Chazal say, you need wood from the tree to make your axe to chop down the tree. If you want to chop down the tree, you need to have something from the tree. Here you want to chop down the Yetzer Hara that's blocking you to have Avodas Hashem, blocking you from Simcha, making you sad, making you depressed, making you numb. So you got to take a little of that sadness, not sadness from Ruchnius, and use it to knock down the other sadness.
How does that work?
Well, so you explain. The Pog Makibesival Zeh Nemak B'chol Eitzav Yemaisa. So there's a Mishlei. In all sadness, there is some benefit. What is the benefit? Meaning, there's no benefit in sadness. Sadness is never good. But what could come out of the right type of sadness in the right time, the right place, is a yisra and is a benefit. When you're metumtum, when you're not moving on, when you're numb, and just standing still and you're not growing your avodas Hashem, feels there's a block, then you need to take this midah of atzvus, of sadness, and utilize it, and we'll see how then it will be. This perek, teach how to convert it. This perek, by the way, we could call Yitzias Mitzrayim. It just came out of Pesach, and we know Yitzias Mitzrayim doesn't end. Yitzias Mitzrayim is ongoing. Till we get out of Galus, we're still in Mitzrayim. Every day there's Mitzrayim. We learn how to use this atzvus to turn it into simcha. That's the goal here. But the pasuk teaches us that in every atzvus there is you could come out with a benefit. If it leads to simcha, then we can see we could get to simcha to a level from the atzvus more than we could get without it. There's a So you need to have basic good klipa to kill the bad klipa. And the Baal Tanya is going to explain now two terms, atzvus and merivus. Atzvus is sadness, merivus is bitterness. When a person is sad, then that's klipa. It has no energy. The person is like dead, no chiyas. The person is sad. He's just not going to do anything. He's not going to accomplish. You have a worker who's sad. He's not going to produce. Bitterness is with energy. With a lot of energy. It's just with gvurus, but there's a lot of energy. The bitterness is full of energy, and that triggers the action. So what we're going to learn here is, if a person is sad, he wants to take from sadness and move it to merivus, to bitterness. And once you get to bitterness, then it moves to simcha. It's a 3-step process. You take the sadness, and you now add in, instead of sadness from whatever reason is, you make sadness from ruchnius, turn it into merivus, and then it will be converted to simcha, as we will see.
Where does cottonus fall in with that?
What?
Cottonus, where does cottonus fall in with that?
Sadness is separate. That's the levels of Malchut. Those don't do this. Abemes ein alev nishba Marius and never shall we chuk miyar pnei Hashem sabushusa situacha nuku b'shem atzos klal b'lashon hakodesh. Truth is, when we're saying that a person should be sad in the last two prakim, sad of his matzav, that he's not at the level that he should be, beruchnius, we're using the word sadness, but the reason the Baal Tanya is really saying it's really merivus. What it means is merivus. Ki atzvus usually be metumtum, ke'evan vein da chayis poliboy. We want to get rid of the timtum alev. That's the whole purpose of these 3 prakim here. How to break that timtum alev. Timtum alev is closed. It's closed. So for that, sadness is not going to help, because sadness causes timtum alev. We need to take that sadness and make it into merivus, and that will open it up. Ava merivus for leiv nishbar, breaking that heart and making it on embittered, that gives him the energy to be bitter. It comes from gvura, and whereas simcha comes from chasad. So even this merivus is not the ideal. It's going to just be a means that we use to take the atzvus, which is totally dead, put some life into it, and now move it over to, afterwards move it to simcha, and we'll see how that 2-step process works. Inside the heart, there's 2 parts. There's the right ventricle, left ventricle. There's one part of the heart is filled with dam, and one part of the heart that brings in the air from the lungs. One part is the Zohar says a person can have tchiyah tikiyah b'liboy mesitrudah, v'yahav mesitrudah. A person can be happy and sad at the same time. They do different parts of his heart. Similarly, over here, when we're talking about a person sad and his avodas Hashem, his matzav haruchni, this is coming from the one part of the heart, but the heart has 2 parts. From the gvurus part of the heart, from the dam part. But there's another part which is the avir, the air that comes in, and that's going to be the chasadim. So now that we know that there's a concept called sadness that leads to timtum alev and no action at all, and then there's sadness that leads to merivus, bitterness, which has a little bit of life. Now we're going to see how we convert it. We need to bring out this sadness from ruchnius, this merivus, to take away that sadness from timtum alev. Because right now when a person is not able to serve Hashem, he feels tied down, bogged down, weighed down by his self. You have to now break the self. And you have to break that self through dinim. That's a klal, the Zohar, that you can't change dinim, you can't turn dinim into rachmim without using the shorish of the dinim. You have to get to the shorish of the dinim, and then you could convert it to kedusha. See, Chazal and Brachas says a person should always stir up. Yargiz is a term used like flame. What is the word? English word? Anger. What does it say?
Incite.
Yeah, inciting. So Yagazam Yesatova Yetzahara. Now, when it says la'olam, it doesn't mean la'olam. It doesn't mean always. It means whenever you need to. Whenever you see that you're not getting anywhere, you're stuck, you're neutral, you have to put yourself in drive, and your life is now moved into neutral, you gotta take a roiges. You need a little bit of that gruas. You gotta step on the gas pedal. When is the best time to do this? The best time to get yourself in a positive state and convert yourself to a positive state if you're sad anyway. You lost a deal, something went wrong, your washing machine broke, whatever situation gets you into an that's the time where you can now activate this merirus and change it to simcha. And really the best time is when you were there anyway. Not l'chadchil you go into a matzah and put yourself into sadness. You're already sad for whatever the situation. You heard something, you're sad. Now but you can't leave yourself that way. You have to always be b'simcha. So now use the tools that this perek is going to give us, which we didn't learn yet, how to take that and come into a matzah of simcha. So start out when you're already there anyway. Don't put yourself there. It's what we call aver l'shma. Some people throughout the doros we suffer from, people who all have good intentions, whether it was the Mendelssohn, the Reform movement, the Meraglim, and all the doros, they all thought they're going to weaken and step down in order to accomplish. But the idea is that over here, we're saying that don't put yourself in a matzah of sadness, but if you're there already, then bring it up to Kedusha. First thing you should do is he should take the sadness that a person has anyway from whatever the situation is and focus to a spiritual part. So you by thinking about his sadness from Mili Dishmayim, he will automatically remove himself from the Azus of Mili Dialma. And I wanted to say that there was a meister with this one Mendel Furtefus. He was a big tzaddik, and he was in the Gulag. He was in the prisons, the Russian prisons, for many years. And usually in those prisons, they had who were the prisoners? Not the lowlifes. In Russia, the prisoners were the scientists, the intellectuals, the smartest people, and they were worried that these people would overthrow the communist government. So you had the greatest intellectuals sitting in the cells. And they once turned to him for the first thing and said, "How come you're always happy?" So they didn't understand why he was in the matzah of happiness. And he told them that, so he answered with a question, said, "Why aren't you happy?" So each one said, "Listen, I have a goal in life. My life dream was I should develop this thing, I should become this, and I should," they all had ideals, and then they were thrown to jail, and that was the end of all their things. Said, "I know why I'm happy, because my goal is to serve Hashem. I can serve Hashem there or here, wherever I am. I have the happiness where I am." So now we're going to see here like this. How do we turn that asis into simcha? So it says like this. This is what your person should think. He should acknowledge the fact that there's weaknesses in himself and his metzias. He should tell his heart, true, I'm totally far away from connecting to Hashem, with all the adjectives we want to use, because I could choose Ra, I've chosen Ra, I'm worse off than a cockroach. All that is describing my guf, a guf or nefesh and the nefesh bahamas. But remember we learned in the beginning of the time that we have a everyone here sitting around this room has a split personality. Besides Nefesh Bahamis, we happen to have another neshama, a Nefesh Elokis. We have a Chelik Hashem that's in the same body. Even the plainest Jew has this. It's only in Golus, it's in prison in our body. So if that's the case, as low as we think we are, and after we break ourselves and say we're nothing, and we're full of averas and this and that, we have to say like this, Adrabam. The more further we are away from Hashem, by never shall kiss should be because Yosef Rachmanas Ulai Gedol Ma'od. If that's the case, the Nefesh Elokis that is sitting in jail inside of us, the Rachmanas is even greater. It's the prince. It's the prince that's sitting in our prison. Then Rachmanas, the lower that we are, the greater the Rachmanas on the Nefesh Elokis. If that's the case, why focus on the lowliness of my body and my Nefesh Bahamis? Let me try to work on Yitzias Mitzrayim, on rescuing the Nefesh Elokis from us, from the body. Restoring it back to its place, to its palace. Maybe that should be my goal, to redirect my attention, instead of focusing on the lowliness of my body, to recognizing the greatness of my neshama, the Nefesh Elokis, and getting out of a good golus. And this is a big contrast. What he's saying is a tremendous yesod. He's saying that the greater the weakness, the more that's something wrong with you, the sadder that you are, then the greater the joy and the happiness that you have afterwards when you release the Nefesh Elokis from that matzav. So, the more you're sad, then the simcha that comes afterwards is even greater. It's all from contrast. So if you refocus your attention, instead of focusing on the you, focusing on the Nefesh Elokis, like Mendel Futterfer said, focusing on your avodas Hashem and Prat Mitzvahs Tefillah, and especially davening Litzoik, L'Hashem B'Tzalah Migulusa B'Gufi Mashukas L'Tzir B'Maskul Davka B'Yisrael, to take the Nefesh Elokis out of the tzrayim of your body and to bring it out. That's the ultimate tachlis, and that brings to a great simcha. V'Zui Tshuva Masan Tovim. Sheva Masan Tovim Shosek Gedei L'Hoshev Chelik L'Kalim Mekoyim V'Shosh L'Cholamim. That's when you restore back the Nefesh Elokis and you bring it back to its shoyrish above. This is one of the reasons why we celebrate Yitzias Mitzrayim on the 15th of Nisan, not on the 21st of Nisan. If you think about it, Yitzias Mitzrayim on Tesla of Nisan, Mitzrayim, Pari was still there in his full force with his army. We got out of Mitzrayim, but he was still after us. It wasn't until 7 days later, till Kriyas Yamsuf, that they got destroyed. So when should we really be b'simcha? When should the great, ultimate siyum of Yitzias Mitzrayim at that point was at Kriyas Yamsuf? So why did we make deal of the first days of Pesach instead of the second days of Pesach? So the answer is that really, it's not a celebration just of what happened back then. It's the Yitzias Mitzrayim we have all the time. And we have it now. And it teaches us that everyone in his own life has Mitzrayim. And the Ikar Simcha is when we get out of that first step. When the Ra is still there. Before we convert the Ra and remove it totally. Even if we still have the Ra, we haven't fully done Shuvah yet. But nevertheless, as soon as we turn out of there, and move into the right path, then we can have Simcha right away. So there's a greater Simcha by Yitzias Mitzrayim when the Mitzrayim is still there. And afterwards, once you convert it, that's more like L'Asad Lavai. The second days of Pesach are more connected with Moshe Mashiach and the Gula. First days was the Gula Rishona. We'll make a big deal about the first days because right now in our Avodah in life, That's what Hashem wants. He puts us in this guf, we'll see over here. He puts us down in this lower world because he wants us to lift it up. The neshama itself doesn't need to be here. It's very happy in Gan Eden. It was very had a good time up there. Didn't want to come down here. It's here for a tafkid, and therefore a person shouldn't be depressed that he's put into his body and put into this crazy world, because Hashem intended that for whatever situation a person has in his life, to take whatever it is and to get out of it and to do as much as he can to lift himself in a positive way. And that's the Yetzias Mitzrayim that we have, and that's the simcha that will occur here after the Marius. Releasing our nefesh kiss from our body, from our Yetzer Hara, from nefesh Bahamas, the shovel base of Via Kanureh, returning her back to her source in Shemayim. It doesn't mean tshuva on Averis, it means returning her to her source. The truth of the matter is, this simcha is the greatest possible when you come out, when you take someone, you take the prince, the Ben Melech, who was locked up. Ben Melech, he was put into prison. The and he was grinding stones, and he was maneuvered the ashpa and all the garbage and the filth, and the Ben Melech. And when you finally, the person who rescues him, the Yatsi, the Chavshi, and imagine the feeling he has leaving that life and coming al Chavshi basis of HaMelech. There's no greater simcha in the world than that. And that simcha one gets after the atzos that he created for himself, or he added into himself in the last two prakim, by pulling your neshama out of that and focusing on nefesh and not focusing on the guf. Even though the Mitzrayim is still there, your guf is still there, your headaches are still there, your worries are there, your averis are not fully fixed up yet. Nevertheless, and your body is called the body, the skin of the serpent. It's R with an ayin, not with an aleph. Our whole physical existence is limited. It's finite. It's holding back on our infinite neshama that's inside of us. And we're talking about a situation where we're not tzaddikim, where we didn't convert it to kedusha yet. We're talking about a person who didn't convert it to kedusha yet, so it's still in its tumah. But nevertheless, take a nashabeinav. A person should, instead of looking at that body and that matzav you're in, just redirect your attention to your neshama de kedusha. Better celebrate the simcha of your nefesh l'kis than the sadness of your nefesh bahamas. Don't mix don't bring together, or don't weaken, or don't nullify the simcha of your soul with the sadness of your guf. That's exactly what Yetzias Mitzrayim means. They had to run. They had to escape by running away from Mitzrayim. Why did they have to run away? Why did Hashem tell Parah, let them go and finish, and we walk out? We wouldn't have had to make matzah. We could have had the only reason we have matzah because we had to run out. We have time to bake it. If Hashem would have told Parah, just send them out regular, what's the pshat? Why did we have to run? So the answer is, when they came on the Mitzrayim, they were in the Memta Shari Tumah. They were all the way down at the bottom. And Kiloi Paskazu Masan on Matan Torah. They didn't, that Tumah and that Klipa and that did not leave them till Matan Torah, till 50 days later. Rak Magmasa B'chefs let's say Snavshon L'kis B'kolos Situachwa Yitumas Mitzrayim L'Davka Mitzrayim. Just to add to Yetzias Mitzrayim is when the Ratzon changed to leave that behind and move in the direction of Matan Torah, but that would take another 49 days. Hashem Uzi Muzi Monusi B'Yam Sar. Hashem is my strength and my refuge when in my difficult days. Maskabi, Manusi, Monusli, Hashem is my refuge. So by Yitzias Mitzrayim, since the Ra was still there by us, we had to run away from it. We had to leave it. But in the future, when Mashiach comes, then it's going to be a different situation. When Mashiach comes, it says, La'asad, Kashav Shamu Chatum in Haaretz, Hashem will destroy the Ra. Then it says, B'manusu lo yisei leichu. You won't have to be washed out. Ki yalech l'fnechem Hashem. Be able to walk out slowly. We walk into the Gula slowly. We won't have to be rushed. So this is the avodah that we have to turn from the Marias to the Simcha. And it's very interesting that, you know, as I mentioned before, the other program that we learned before, they're really fire and brimstone. They're really, you know, knocking you apart. So in Sifrei Musa, what we would do pretty much, we were wallowing in self-pity after those two program. But since there's a Hasidic Sefer, we take that sadness and bitterness and we use it to bring us to ultimate simcha. That itself, Gufa, coming out of Mitzrayim, what a great simcha it is. What a release of happiness. And that's how we have to feel. And and this leaving, taking your neshama out of the matzav you're in and releasing it and letting it flourish in simcha, comes simcha nefesh to service over simcha kash yoshev liboy nasid tfuna. But you also think about the fact that, one second, the sadness that he has is coming from his body and his nefesh bahamas. So there's really necham over here. Why? How could he be menachem himself from his matzav? He's releasing his nefesh kiss, but nevertheless the nefesh bahamas is still there, and his guf is still there. So he should say the following to himself: Hey Nemes, I'm far away from Hashem. I didn't make myself. I didn't create myself. Hashem created me, created the situation I'm in, put me in the family setting, the life setting, the circumstances that I'm in. This is the life that Hashem put me in. And why did Hashem do that to me? Let's say a person is totally incapacitated. There's all the different situations that people go through in life and unfortunate situations. But who did that? Hashem did that. Why did he do that? Take a part of him, take a part of his neshama, chelik of his ar, which is infinite and fills all the worlds, and boundless. And he put that neshama into mishcha l'chivya, into this nachash, tzipas rucha, this body, this lowly body. Why did he do that? He Hashem did it, not me. This me part, which is low, which I knocked down, Hashem had deliberately put my neshama in there. Why? But this is the secret of the whole thing. That it's an aliyah. By going down to this thing and then coming out, because the idea is we're going to not only come out of the gates in Mitzrayim, we're going to elevate it as well. The Nefesh Bahamas from Klibis Nagi v'chol v'sheh hein b'chinas machshav diba ma'aser shelo adei sapshusa b'ma'aser diba machshav v'satayro. By turning ourselves, focusing ourselves on our Nefesh Elokis and learning and davening and filling ourselves with mitzvahs, automatically we're going to start lifting up that Nefesh Bahamas that we did create, that Hashem put our neshama into. That's the whole purpose. By Yichus, we're going to see this aliyah of taking the Nefesh Bahamas and lifting it up also. That's the whole reason we were created. Otherwise, Hashem wouldn't have made this world. He would have left us in Gan Eden. He put us here to lift up, not enough to take the neshama and come out of the guf and celebrate in the simcha, but we have to take along our body with it. We have to lift up the matzav that we're in. And we'll learn later on how that's done. If that's the case, this is what a person's attitude should be. This should be my goal in life. To bring into one's thoughts Because of Lech Hashem Nashi has to bring Hashem into everything that he's doing. Then L'kashem Machshavti V'Diburi, Machshav V'Diburi Tzbarach, to connect all my thoughts and my speech with Hashem. Family Guvay Allah Zorus V'Nenu, all the halachas in the Torah, to connect all of those. V'chein Ma'aseh mitzvahs, and also in actions he should do with the mitzvahs. As he bind himself with Torah and mitzvahs to connect to all that. V'chein Nikos Torah Meshivas Nefesh Pirish Meshiva L'Makar V'Shasha. A person redirects his focus on his nefesh kiss and fulfills the Torah mitzvahs with a chiyas and besimcha, then ultimately he will reach the level Zen Nemar Kudi Hashem Shom Samchin Lev. That's going to bring to the ultimate simcha, and not the ultimate simcha is from focusing on not oneself, focusing on the nefesh kiss. So we should be zoicha. We should do. Now we're coming into new Chodesh year, and Hashem Refecha. Hashem should heal all of Klal Yisrael. It's a good zman. The first rain that's coming in, I think it's supposed to rain at some point. If you ever go to Borough Park in Williamsburg, and on tomorrow, you'll see that people, when it starts raining, everyone's running outside with their mouth up, so the rain should go into their mouth. The first rain, Chodesh year, is better than all the medicines a person can take in life.
Well, the first day, the second day,
Rosh Chodesh year?
The rain.
Yeah.
The rain.
Rosh Chodesh, it says from Rosh Chodesh year, so if you do both, you go out 2 days, it's okay. Anyway, okay, and what should be B'Simcha Talmud.
Nice.